Welcome to this week's episode of Hustle Culture Dropout. I am your host, Chastity Campbell, and I am super excited this week to have a special guest on the podcast. Dr. Morgan Jean Craig Belknap is a doctor of social work and a licensed marriage and family therapist. She is now on her own healing journey as a survivor of the Las Vegas Route 91 mass shooting, which has led her to follow a journey where creating healing communities is her passion. She's transitioned her career to focus more on helping people on their healing journeys, primarily in spaces offering her story and her wisdom through speaking engagements and workshops. She also has several projects that she's working on surrounding her focus of helping individuals with feeling less broken, including publishing a book of her poems regarding her experience surviving Route 91. So I am so excited I was able to hear her speak and talk about her story. And I knew immediately that I wanted to bring her onto the podcast so she could share her experiences and what her healing journey looked like. I'm really excited about this episode, and I know you guys are going to enjoy it. Hi, Dr. Morgan Jean Craig Belknap. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Very good. Thank you so much for being on today. We literally just got done talking about your very long name and how we shorten it and how we don't shorten it. And you have a very unique story of lots of twists and turns. I had the privilege of listening to your story at a workshop that we both attended, and I knew immediately on like day one, this would be a great person to have on the podcast because you have so much wisdom. But journey and the path that you've taken to sort of get where you are right now is very unconventional. And while I think it started sort of on a traditional path, it's definitely took some twists and turns along the way. And so I'm so happy that you have taken the time out of your schedule that I know is super busy to come on and to share your story with us. And so thank you so much for being here. Why don't you start us out and just kind of give us a little history, and then we'll jump into sharing your story with everyone.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, you can just call me Morgan. I'm a doctor of social work. And as you said, I've seen a lot of different twists and turns. And I think the funny thing and the thing that I've kind of learned along the way is to just, be comfortable with change, pivot, and to just allow myself to just grow in the places that I want to grow in. And so I'm the owner of my own business, Healing Not Healed. And basically the business kind of started out actually in 2020. It started out with a different name. It's called Sunshine and Brain Love. It's a really long name, just like my name, right? Really long. And so I was like, I don't know.
Suits you.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely me. But it actually started out with like face masks, like, 2020 era face masks.
Yeah.
With mental health quotes on it to just kind of like help bring some light into the world. And so that's kind of where my business kind of started. And it has evolved. My business is mostly focused in on helping people in their healing journey. So with products, that's with self-care products. I also have a Western aesthetic. I'm the doctor in cowgirl boots, and that's kind of where I kind of like niche into. And so I sell Western goods, I sell wellness goods, and then crossing over to the services part of that, I'm working on some different programs that I'm hoping to launch in the very near future regarding, some pieces of my wisdom that I'm hoping to impart on other people. So that's something that I'm also working on.
I think as somebody who's like has sort of this like entrepreneurial like mindset, one of the things that I have learned very early on, I can remember people telling me when I started my product-based business of candles is like, don't get married to your product, because so often you will start with something, but that evolves, and you definitely have done that. I also wanted to mention, I don't know if you're still doing them, but you made the cutest stickers for us that you gave to us at Conscious Collab, and they were so cute and I loved them. And you've also recently written a book of poems, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. And why don't you tell us a little bit about that and how that came about?
Yeah. So part of my like pivoting journey is that when I was 21 years old, I attended Route 91, the Las Vegas music festival. And as many people know, and, as I kind of shared my story a little bit with you, that turned into the United States' largest mass shooting. And after that event, I went on to just kind of begin my healing journey and to help people and, wanting to like work through that. And I've learned to turn that pain into passion and, help people. And so kind of fast forward to February 14th. I know the exact date. This year, unfortunately, there was yet another mass shooting. And that was with the Kansas City Chiefs. And so I went home to my husband that night, and I was just, crying in his arms. And I just felt so broken and felt like, wow, all this time has passed. It's been over 6 years now since I'm at this moment. And so I just think like, wow, I still feel so broken at times, and that just sucks.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just kind of like had this thought, and I asked my husband, can you like read my poems? And he was like, what? I'm like mid sobbing, like, can you read my poems? And he's like, yeah, like I'll do anything for you right now, like of course. Yeah. And so I looked through my phone and I find all these poems, and I thought it was just like going to be 2 or 3 poems that I had written like over the years. And I started looking and looking in the notes section of my phone. I found like almost a dozen poems that I had written, letters to myself. And I realized like, wow, I have quite a few of these. And as he was reading them, he just kind of looked up at me, and he calls me MJ. So of all the names, that's what he shortened it to, MJ. Yeah. And so he says, MJ, like, you need to publish these. And I was like, what do you mean like publish these? Like the world doesn't want to read this. They don't want to hear this. And he said, I think they need to. Like they may not want to, but they need to. And
I love
so
that
really, gave me some things to kind of think about. And so literally from that moment until the next month, I had added more poems that they were just like coming to me, and it all just kind of came into this incredible compilation of almost 50 poems that are all categorized by the stages of grief. So they have, they kind of go into the different stages of grief. And I as a therapist, I'm familiar with the stages of grief and everything.
right
And I'm also familiar with the sense that they're not always stages. They're not always, this linear thought process of, oh, you wake up angry one day and don't worry, acceptance is on its way. Like that's not how it works. And so, this book of poems, like kind of like teeters through that, and, kind of helps people understand like, the pain that's there. And then also like the resilience that kind of comes through that journey, and just kind of like the interweaving of, ups and downs. And so now I have the entire book put together. I hired on an artist. He created some beautiful artwork. I put everything together, and it is actually fully published now.
That is
I don't know how I
amazing.
did it so quickly, but I did it, and I think that, kind of is a good analogy for a good metaphor for just my life of, going where I'm feeling led. That's my
Right.
biggest thing. I chase whatever sets my soul on fire, and that's always what I do. And I
Yeah.
find that when I get stuck in the I should do this or I should do that, it's where I feel the most burnt out and I feel the most stuck.
Yeah.
Which, when I heard a little bit about your story and heard a little bit about, your podcast and your community and everything, I thought, wow, I resonate with that idea of burnout.
Yeah.
Because, I've gone through so many different experiences where, straight out of, first of all, like the high school to college pipeline, right? Like it's very real. Like,
Yeah.
hey, you're 18 years old, go figure out what you want to do for the rest of your life. That's scary.
Yeah, well, exactly. Because we're so wise at 18
yes,
to be able to choose a career to sustain us for the rest of our lives, right?
With our undeveloped frontal lobes,
Yeah, exactly.
And so, yes, and so I tried to figure out, what is it that I want to do? And so I, went to school and, went to my undergrad, and well, I took kind of a different path.
Right.
I had to go through some other schooling before I went straight into undergrad, because as I shared with you previously, that I initially got denied from every single college that I applied to when I was a senior in high school. And that was really rough. You're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and ready to take on the world. And then, the world is like, we don't want you. So I got a job and, tried to get in with a night school that was specifically geared towards, adults going back to school. But, it all ended up working out. And, I kind of joke I joke now and say like, I wish I could go back to all those colleges that denied me and say like, oh, I have a doctorate now, and you
Yeah,
didn't really think that I was
exactly.
ready to go to school. That I wasn't
Yeah,
serious enough
exactly.
or something.
Yeah,
I don't like to throw my degree around just in general, but that is one moment that I would make an exception for.
absolutely. Understandable.
Yes. So
Yeah.
yeah, I've kind of gone all those different paths and everything.
One of the things that I think is so unique about that is that I feel like it's very difficult as an 18-year-old to try to look at what the rest of your life looks like. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like sometimes as a society as a whole, we sort of set these young adults up for failure because you have this expectation where you think that this is what you're supposed to do. So then when it doesn't turn out that way, maybe there's an obstacle that ends up in your path, you somehow think there's something wrong with you instead of maybe the system needs to be changed, or maybe it's just not your path that you're supposed to be on. But that's very,
Exactly.
very hard concept for mature adults to understand, let alone to expect like an 18-year-old to understand. So I think it speaks volumes for you and how you operate in life to be able to take that denial at such a young age. I'm sure at the time it's very difficult. Like, right, like nobody likes to be
Yeah. I
denied what
cried
you
in
want
my
to
sleep.
do. Yes, I mean,
Yes.
absolutely. Like that is completely justified, but it's so interesting to then be able to kind of put yourself in a position to where you're like, well, this maybe won't work for me, but I'm going to do it this way instead. Like you didn't
Mm-hmm.
just give up on it. Like you didn't
Oh,
just, which
yes.
I
Yeah.
think a lot of people can. Like I think a lot of people,
Mm-hmm.
like I think it's easy to just be like, well, I didn't get that particular thing that I wanted. So I'm not going to chase that dream anymore. I'm going to go, over here and try this. So I think it's exceptional that you were able to try this untraditional path to actually accomplish what it is that I want to accomplish. But that's a really hard thing to try to like figure out as a young adult,
It is.
And
Yes.
so once you were able to kind of get through your schooling, like, did you know immediately that therapy was something that you wanted to pursue?
So I definitely started out with psychology just in general for my undergrad. And,
Hmm.
I liked psychology. I thought it was a fun, kind of like, brain, and you get to know people, and, that's the
Yeah.
whole thing. I loved it. But I didn't quite know what I wanted to do with it. And so I, had to start going to therapy for my own mental health because of the shooting and everything. And I'm developing PTSD as well. And so that was something that I really had to work through and to wrestle with. And so it took me a little while to find a therapist that was a good fit. But once I did, I, felt very comfortable and thought, wow, how beautiful would it be to hold space for other people in this way? And
Hmm.
so I was like, hey, that's what I want to do. So I immediately, went right from my undergrad into a master's program, and, was there for 2 years. And then it takes 2 years, and some of those overlap a little bit, but it takes
Right.
2 full years to get your license as a therapist. And so I hustled. And I'm using that word specifically because I hustled too hard and I got burned
Yeah.
out, and it was problematic, to say the least,
Yeah.
for myself.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm good at what I do, and I enjoy being a therapist in certain capacities and everything. But the dream goal that I had was, okay, I'll do private practice and just have my 25-ish clients,
Hmm.
and then that'll just be what I do. I'll move it around, one day when I have kids, and that'll just kind of be my life. And so I thought that was the route I wanted to go into. And so I would, find one, 9 to 5 job that I liked.
Hmm.
And then I would find another one, and then I didn't like it. And then I would find another one, and then I didn't really like that one. And so I kept like finding myself like coming up short and saying, oh, like, why am I still so like unfulfilled? Why am I getting so burnt out? Why am I devoting so much of my like off the clock time and mental energy for these like on the clock things? And it was just becoming too much. It was like overwhelming me. And so
Hmm.
in September, well, prior to that, I realized this was happening. And so as my kind of 2 year mark of getting, actually, no, that kind of overlapped a little bit too, but that's okay. Within that time frame that I was realizing that I was like, kind of burning out a little bit, I thought, okay, well, this is kind of the end goal, of getting a master's and getting licensed. Like, this is the end goal. And I don't
Right.
really know if I want to do this anymore. So I thought, why don't I just go back for more school? So I went back for my doctorate and then,
Mm-hmm.
got even more school. And so now, I've completed the terminal degree of doctor, and I actually switched paths over to a social worker, just
Mm-hmm.
because I wanted more of the community aspect. And this is where I have found the home for myself a little bit more. This is kind of the path that I'm kind of leaning into now, and I'm trying to be open to it because I think, like, in the back of my mind, I'm like, but I worked so hard to become a licensed therapist. Why am I not doing that full time? Why am I, kind of
Right.
putting that to the side a little bit? And, that pains my heart a little bit. But then I also think, like, those experiences helped build me and were stepping stones to where I am now. That
Right.
now that I see what people deal with on an individual level, I can help them at a community level, because the community level healing, so workshops, conferences, podcasts, the things
Yeah.
that I do on a daily basis, writing a book, like, these are the things that fill my soul the most. And these are the
Mm-hmm.
things that are going to help me stay the less burnt out, the least burnt out, over
Right.
time.
Yeah.
And so this is what I kind of needed to do. And, I had thought I knew what I wanted many, many times. And now, I've completely gotten rid of the whole 9 to 5 job thing. And I just do my business full time. I still have a couple private practice clients through a group practice that I'm still a
Mm-hmm.
part of. And so I still do a little bit of therapy here and there. But the community work is what I do most of the time. And that's been the most fulfilling for me. And, I'm still trying to erase some of that, like, guilt of, not, I know that there's so much hurt in the world that's still needing, like,
Yeah.
one-on-one services. And so, having those skills, there's that kind of, like, guilt of, like, oh dang, like, I should probably be doing more of that. But then I also know that for myself, and, I have a wonderful husband. I have two beautiful kiddos that I'm a
Mm-hmm.
bonus mama to. And so they're little still, and so they,
Yeah.
need raising. And so my husband, do our best and everything. And so it's something that, I just can't give that part of myself anymore. And I have to
Yeah.
understand that, like, I'm making that sacrifice not only for me but for my family too. And so that's been hard.
Yeah.
It's been a hard pill to swallow, but it's,
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that I think that we do a lot of times, and is that, again, you sort of have this expectation of, I could definitely see people being like, oh, but you like invested so much of your time and your
Mhm.
energy and your resources and your finance, like
Yes.
the investment alone
Yes.
to like gain all of that education, and you feel like you have to do that. But at the end of the
Hmm.
day, like, who's actually telling you you have to do that? Like, it's
Exactly.
really, really hard, I think, to stand up for, like, to just kind of like buck the system and be like, that's just not for me. Like, that might
Yeah.
be great for other people, but to have the self-awareness and really the courage to say, like, that's just, and it doesn't mean like that's not going to be you at some point again,
Exactly. Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
different, I think different seasons allow for
Mhm.
different approaches. And I think when you're in different seasons of life, you have the ability to be like, well, this is where my family needs me right now, or this is where my heart is right now. And I think we so often sort of like pigeonhole ourselves into this, like, well, this is what I chose to be, so I have to stay in this box, and I
Yes.
cannot go out of this box. Like, this is the box that I'm supposed to be in. And you constantly have this feeling of, like, especially when people are like, well, what do you do? And
Hmm.
you
Yes.
have to try to explain what you do by what society wants you to define, yourself as. But I'm always like, but that's what I do is a part of me, but it's just not me as a
Yes.
whole. There are so many other aspects. There are so many things as a human being that you can be interested in and want to pursue that just feel right in your life.
Yes.
And something that you said earlier that really struck me, and I'm probably just going to have to like jot this down as soon as we get done recording, or like listen to this when we air it and like remind myself. But you were talking about how you sort of allow yourself to go with what like sets your soul on fire and like what you feel very passionate about at that time. And there is like nothing wrong with that. And I feel like so often, I know I have done this so many times, is I am so fearful that people are going to perceive me as like flaky or somebody who just doesn't know what they want, or who's just like
Yes. Yeah.
aimlessly floating through the world and like, oh, well, she liked this 2 months ago and now she likes this and now she's doing this. And I've talked with my own therapist about this because this has been like a very big hang up for me for a very long time in my life. And she's like, what if the person that you're trying to define yourself as is just a person who has a lot of interests? Like, what's wrong with that?
Mhm.
Like, there's nothing wrong
Yes.
with that. And what works for your life, like right now, might not work for your life in a year or 6 months or 6 weeks, but like sort of accepting that and having that self acceptance. So I love that. I feel like the different avenues and the different paths that you have taken, you've sort of already kind of come to like that realization about yourself,
Mhm.
which I think is so wise and is so like beneficial, because to me, that's going to allow you to experience so many things in life, and to be able to, like if you're writing poetry and you're sharing that with people, you're helping people through that way. It's not necessarily through a one-on-one situation, but you're still basically
Exactly.
doing the same thing that you love to do, which is like building community and helping people and having discussions with people. And I think that so often we just get very hung up on feeling like we have to keep ourselves in that little box and
Yes.
somehow like explain that to people, like explain why I chose to like now go onto this path. Like, have you felt like that in your life? Have you felt like outside influences or the perception that you've had by other people maybe in your life, or maybe just acquaintances, have looked at you that way? Have you ever felt that?
So it's interesting that you asked that question because I think I've mostly like felt this, and it's mostly from myself. And
Right.
so whenever I look at my Instagram account or my professional one, I think like, wow, I have too much on there. Like, too many different things. Like I have my, my products, my self care stuff. I have my Western stuff. Should I make like a separate, trying to like divide out my life. And I have to remind myself that like this is just who I am. And this is a part of
Yeah.
me. This is my, authentic journey. And sometimes I mean, every now and then I do feel like, I have so much kind of going on and so many different things that when somebody says like, oh, what do you do for work? It's like I
Yeah.
do a lot of things,
You're
and
like, how
sometimes it
much
feels like
time do
nothing
you
at all.
have?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And so, I kind of get stuck into that. Well, I do other things. And so, I kind of like offer that up a little bit. But when it really like goes down to the nitty gritty of like, what are the things that I do, I sum it up into a couple words, and that's building community. And I do
Yeah.
it through all these different avenues, but building community at the end of the day, that's what I'm doing. And,
Yeah.
I figure that if I can help inspire resilience, if I can help, you know, create different patterns for people that they find are healthier for themselves through their self care routine. Like all those things, if I can just help a little bit with that, just from my, semi removed, spot here, then that's a
Mhm.
success. And,
Mm,
I'm very big on sustainability when it comes to life practices. And so I
mhm.
think, like even just building my business now, it's like, okay, trying to create sustainable patterns of, okay, I was starting to do, a bunch of social media things. And then, every single day I was posting, I was trying to work on my TikTok. And so I was
Yeah.
posting like, every single day, twice a day, 3 times a day. And it was exhausting. And so then finally I was like,
Yes.
I'm just going to take a break from that because,
Yeah.
nobody's going to knock down my door and say, you haven't posted your 2 to 3 TikToks today, and
Exactly. Right. Well, and I do think when it's just you, like maybe you're passionate about like the creation process, but you're not so passionate about like building out the content for it. But you still have to do
yes,
it because you're like this solopreneur person who has to
yes,
wear all the hats. You sort of are able to say like that's just not like my area of strength, and I just do
Mhm.
not want to spend my time doing it because it makes me miserable and it makes me unhappy. And so then when you're able to get to a point where you can delegate that, like that's the first thing you're like offloading, which just frees you up. It doesn't make you less busy, but it frees you up to be busy with the things that you want to be busy with.
Exactly.
Right. And of course, you hear, everything is like, oh, in order to like market your business, you need to be on social media and you need to be doing this, you need to be doing this. And there are a lot of things that I like about social media, but there are a lot of things that's just me as a as a human being, I do not like to, like, there are just times when at the end of the day, I don't want to talk to people. I don't want to show up on stories on Instagram. I don't want to make a reel. I don't want to make a TikTok. I really do
Yes.
not want to like be forward facing.
Mhm.
And the more you like resist what your personality is, like literally you're doing your business such a disservice by just
Mhm.
not following what you're comfortable with. And I do very much believe that we have to like step out of our comfort zone a little bit and
Mhm.
push ourselves, but not to the point of where we literally are like hate our business or we hate like
Yes.
showing up in that capacity. And I
Mhm.
think that when we do that, people can see
They
that you are
can.
not being the authentic version of yourself, right? And so I just feel like I go through definite times of it as well where I feel like, oh, I need to be on, I need to be on it. But I think more and more people are just really sick of being sold to on
Mhm.
social
Yes.
media,
Mhm.
myself included. And
Me
it's
too.
hard because when when that's what you like use your social media for, obviously like the algorithm like just pushes that out to you. So I constantly get pushed out with like other coaches or
Me
other small
too.
business owners or whatever. Like this
Yep.
is like what I'm seeing. And I'm like, I just like want to see somebody that's like hanging out with their kids, like at
Yeah.
a restaurant, like, like show
Yes.
me what you're eating, like take me back to the days
Yes.
when people just only talked about like what they were eating and you didn't try to
Mhm.
sell me like the like whatever the meal plan or whatever it is. Like
Yep. Super
I
bloom
just
or whatever that is. Yeah.
yes, like I'm just like, oh my gosh, for
Oh.
goodness sakes, like can I just have a conversation with somebody? But then, on the I think on the other aspect of that, sometimes too, you realize, like, well, I am also running a business and I am
Mhm.
also like trying to like make some money and like support my family
Yes.
and like
Yeah.
contribute to whatever. And so it's really hard to like do that. But I think that more and more people are getting to the point where they just like want you to show up as your authentic self. And if your authentic self only shows up twice a week, that's just who
Mhm.
you are. And
Exactly.
I read something today about even on the days when I can only give 40%, but I've given 40%, I've actually given 100%. That's all I am capable of doing today. But if I actually did that, then yeah, like you did it. And I tell people too, like all the time, people sometimes think that consistency equals 100%. Like consistency
Mhm.
equals, every single day. Well, consistency doesn't have to be every single day. Consistency can
Yeah.
be I'm showing up on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but I do it
Yeah.
every week. Like I show up every week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Like that's consistent, right? So,
Mhm.
yeah, I definitely think that there's probably a little bit of an evolution, hopefully, that will maybe play in our favor a little bit more, those of us who like don't want to like be so
Yes.
on all of the time, and
Absolutely.
trying to figure out, but kind of going back to your point too about like looking at what like your Instagram feed looks like and you're like, oh, I have all of these different
Yes.
things on there. But then again, like at the same time, I mean, I'm like, when I sit down and have a conversation with somebody, just a conversation, and I'm talking to
Mhm.
them about my life and the things that are happening, there's a lot of stuff that's going on. Like
Mhm.
I'm not just talking about my business. I'm talking about my
Exactly.
business and my full-time job and my kids and my dog
Mhm.
and the fact that I need to get an oil change in my car or whatever it is. Like
Yes.
there's just a lot of different things that make up a person. Before I let you go here, I want to hear a little bit about if there's an underlying sort of thread in what you've experienced in your lifetime at this point. I feel like the big underlying theme is resilience because
Mhm.
of the experiences that you have and the healing that you've had to do. I know you've talked about healing, not healed, because you very
Mhm.
much believe that none of us really arrive at this place of being healed, right? Like we're
Yes.
constantly evolving and constantly healing ourselves.
Yes.
And for people who may be struggling in some aspect, I think when you talk about kind of going through the stages of grief when you were writing your poetry book
Mhm.
and you're sharing that experience of being in a mass shooting, which I can't even begin to fathom the amount of healing that has to come with
Mhm.
something like that. It very much is like a grieving process, right? Like it very
Yes.
much like that experience, like you had this expectation, not only for that evening, but how the course of that evening completely changed and derailed your life and so many other people's lives, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And going through that grieving process is very much, I think, part of that healing journey and becoming resilient. So how do you communicate that to people who may be struggling with kind of like this big tragic thing has happened in my life, this experience that has changed me that I now have to let go of. Like I now have to sort of be like, this is not what I thought my life was going to look like is not going to look like that.
Mm-hmm.
What steps like helped you that you can pass on to other people that you feel like they would benefit from?
Absolutely. So I would say a couple different things. The main thing, with this healing that healed theme brand, just kind of it's really my life branding too, healing that healed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when people initially hear it, sometimes people get kind of like off put by it of like, oh, well, that's kind of harsh. Like, oh, okay, I'm never going to be healed. Like, that sucks. And like, yeah, we
Yeah.
can sit in that, for a minute and acknowledge that does suck. And that is really hard. And there's also, the beauty that comes with healing, that there's lots of growth, there's opportunities for empathy, that people can really relate to people. Community can be built. I had no idea that this, tragic event in my life could turn into such a community building thing that,
Mm-hmm.
I've over the years, I've had bracelets, regarding it. I have a tattoo, I have shirts, I have hats, and I have, bumper sticker, all the things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the little memorabilia. And the reason why I have it is not just because, I want to show the world that I went through something hard. Like,
Right.
it's not why. It's because I want the people that recognize it to see it on me, on my car, in my stuff, and to relate to it and say, wow, like, okay, either that if they were also there, or maybe if they were at another mass shooting, whatever it is, but that they can relate to it in some way, and that they can feel connected to another human. Because I think that oftentimes, when we feel really lost and really lonely and just kind of, desperate for something, that connection is the thing that we need the
Yeah.
most. And oftentimes, that can start with therapy one-on-one. And I also think that it can be really, really beautiful in a community setting, making friends and talking to people and, creating these new
Mm-hmm.
connections. And really, that's the way that you get through things. You don't ever get over them. You don't ever get past them. You just figure out how to, so I crochet on the side. This is related, I
Mm-hmm.
promise. I crochet, and I've crocheted through the years. I probably won't surprise you, had a crochet business for like a hot minute too, back in the day when I was younger. And so the thing about like crocheting is that the threads most of the time kind of go together, but especially if you like change a new color or something, it looks like, very different. And to kind of connect them together, you kind of have to weave some things together to make it look flat and like, sort of put together.
Mm-hmm.
And the world may see like, oh, well, that's really put together. And, me knowing that I was the one who made it and that I, tucked all the threads in a certain strategic way so nobody else would see. I know what's on the inside. I know that it might be a little bit messy, but when other people see the beauty of it looking all, kind of just combined, and it may not be perfect. It won't be perfect.
Right.
It's handmade. It's beautiful. I love that because of it, but that we can see that there's ways to intertwine things through different pieces of our life. And for
Yeah.
me, my biggest tragedy turned into what I do for a living now. A lot of people, they can't do that, or they're not ready to do that yet. And that is
Mm-hmm.
okay too.
Right.
There's no supposed to's in healing. It's just, wherever you're at. And so for me, in my current healing journey, like I said, I kind of had to pivot a little bit because I realized that I wasn't quite ready to do all of that work
Yeah. No,
you know,
absolutely.
all the time. And so, I am by no means a put together blanket. I am, all the messy pieces that are somehow intertwined. And at the end of the day, it's gonna look good. It's gonna look okay.
Yeah.
But I know what's, underneath, and that's okay.
Yeah. I love that. I love that so much. I think that it's so accurate. And I think that quicker we are to recognize that what you see, like what I see, like right here is so limited to what actually people
Mhm.
are experiencing or have experienced or what they're going through, what they're healing from, what they're, there's
Mhm.
so little that people that you like are forward facing and that you show other people. And
Mhm.
so I think that at the basic core of any human, you want to be understood, right? You want to be understood, you want to be
Yes.
accepted, you want to be in community. We're literally created to be in community with one another.
Yes, exactly.
And so I to connect with somebody and to feel, that's why I feel it's just so important for, I feel like everybody has a story to share. Everybody has a story to share.
Yes.
And no matter how insignificant you might think it is, I mean, your story actually is like very impactful, and it was a very prominent, sort of in your face thing that happened to you. Not everybody has that story, but it's still, even if that's not what happened to you, or you didn't suffer this big tragic loss or whatever it is, your experience still is important and your story is still important to share, because you don't ever know what person it that may, help and help them feel like less alone. So I love that that is something that you recognize and understand and promote as well, because I think it's so important just for people to not feel alone in this world, because it's
Exactly.
really can be crappy to feel that way. So thank you so much for being with me today. I definitely feel like, again, like you just have such a wonderful outlook on the world and on life, and the ability to be able to continue to pivot. And while it might not be easy and it might come with some obstacles and some being scared and being uncertain about things, you've been able to like navigate through this life and end up with this like incredible platform, with this incredible voice and this incredible heart to share with people. And I thank you so much for coming on today to share that with my audience. And I know that they are going to find so much value in that. So we appreciate you being here.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here. It's been great to just kind of share a little bit about my story, you know. And I think
Yeah.
that it's been beautiful to just have this conversation with you. So thank you again.
Yeah. Thank you so much. All right, that's it for this episode of Hustle Culture Dropout. I'm your host and real life bestie, Chastity Campbell. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast, leave a 5-star review if you loved it. Don't even bother if it's anything less than 5 stars. You can also follow me on socials at Chastity Campbell Co. or check out the website at chastitycampbell.com. Until next time, here's to living our most radically authentic and unapologetic lives. Thanks for listening.